Good evening. Thank you for joining the Arkansas Fly Fishers again today for our August meeting. This is our third virtual meeting, and I hope you've enjoyed the last two. And it's certainly been a learning experience for us to pull these together, and a special thanks to Ron Blom for making these come together. This certainly would be something that would be beyond the scope of a small fishing club without that kind of assistance. I want to tell you about some decisions that we've made over the last couple of weeks. The board has decided that we will not meet again in person for our monthly meetings and sipping and tying until the first of the year. And that's largely driven by the need to resource events like this, which is really difficult to do month to month. We are going to throw our energy into doing more online content to include tying classes, and we're also going to look at micro events. And what I mean by micro events is small groups of people, kind of like what we did today, and I'm going to talk a little bit with Duane Hada about the painting class we had today. But we're also looking at casting clinics. Our casting coaches program is well underway. We're developing a series of coaches who can deliver content to small groups. So we're making the investments to kind of resource into what it takes to be relevant and active in the COVID environment. So again, thank you for joining us. I think this is going to be a great program. And I want to start by talking to Duane Hada about the painting class we held today, doing watercolor trout portraits, or watercolor fish portraits, because quite frankly, not everybody did a trout.
That's right. Well, first of all, thank you guys for having me. The Arkansas Fly Fishers is something I've been part of, doing different things over the years and know a lot of folks in that group, and you're a wonderful group. You've done amazing things for conservation and fly fishing in this state, and keep it up. It's good to see you guys very active and growing, I hear.
We are. Thank you. Well, we're glad to have you back. I'll tell you, I was one of the participants in the class today. It was actually a really special day. My daughter goes to college this week, and it was kind of our last dad-daughter event before she goes off to school, so that was kind of fun. I'm actually going to take. I'm shocked. I'm not shocked that her picture turned out great. I'm shocked that mine looks like a fish.
Not a bad flathead, I wouldn't say.
Unfortunately, it was a brown trout.
No.
It was like
great.
It was kind of one of those where I drew it the way I wanted. It had a mouth on either end. That's how I think all trout should be. Now, it was a lot of fun. We had about 12 people that took the class. Can you tell us a little bit about those? Because I know you do those from time to time, and we'd actually like to see this be a more regular event for us in Central Arkansas.
I do a lot of these painting. That's part of what I do up there in the Ozarks where I live. You got to do a lot of things to keep a living going anyway. But as a painting instructor, and of course my fly fishing enthusiasm and passion for that sport ties directly to that. So for years I've been teaching what's become a very popular, probably my most popular workshop, and that is doing the trout portrait class in transparent watercolor. This group here was probably, I always tout, just come prepared with a good attitude and we can teach you. And you guys prove that very well. A lot of times I'll get people who are all the way from professional artists who've never painted trout that want to come, and a lot of student artists, hobby artists, that type of thing. I think I had maybe one person in this class that would actually confess to the fact that they had actually painted with watercolor before. Now that's scary to me because that really puts a lot of pressure on the fact of, I've got to be able to teach it well, but you guys knocked it out of the park. They were a very enthusiastic bunch. They painted some beautiful pieces. They took instruction so well. I think what you're going to see is a lot of people are going to go home, head to the nearest art supply store and pursue this. So there's a lot of enthusiasm, and everybody came off with a very, I think, respectable, if not top quality piece.
Well, I'm pleased with mine, and I can tell you, I think probably the biggest endorsement you can get is I had 3 or 4 students came back and said, if you do this again next year, I'm signing up again, because they're like, I think it'd be a lot of fun because now I kind of know what's coming at me a little bit. And so that repetition. So if people have had a good enough time, they've come and done it once, and they're already said, I'm in for next year if you do it again, that's pretty tall cotton.
Well, that speaks well for all of it, you guys, and just the way the class, and people, it was neat to me to listen as people paint and talk and tell their fishing stories, or I saw relationships develop right there of people wanting to join the Arkansas Fly Fishers, people wanting to get together and fish other people's waters, or, that's what it's all about. It's that community of fly fishers, and that happened today.
Well, my hope is the next time I take it, I'm brave enough to do a smallmouth. There was one guy that did a smallmouth that turned out fantastic, but it looked like a little bit much for me.
It's different. They're monochromatic somewhat in color, so there's a little bit of a challenge, not a real distinct, there's a distinct pattern, but it's a very intricate pattern if you're going to do the bar markings on it, which he chose to do, and I kind of like, you bit off a big one here, but he knocked it out. It was great.
Well, it was a great class, and I hope we can do it again. Now what I want to do is we're going to transition, and I'm going to let Duane talk about one of the things I'm most passionate about, and I know he's most passionate about, which is smallmouth fishing. I don't know if you've read the Democrat Gazette today, but he's featured pretty highly, and I hope he'll talk a little bit about one of the things that I know Duane and I've talked about, which is the balance between building a constituency that cares about smallmouth as a game fish, but also protecting the resource, which is a critical issue for the state of Arkansas because as we've increased access, we've also increased pressure on what is frankly a precious resource and a limited resource and a more limited resource than people understand. So I'll let Duane take it from here because he definitely knows more about this than I do.
Thank you for inviting me down here to Little Rock with the Arkansas Fly Fishers, and I want to talk to you about a subject that many of you know me, and I'm very passionate about smallmouth fly fishing and smallmouth conservation throughout Arkansas. And the smallmouth bass, this is something that I grew up with. I was born and raised in North Arkansas. Boone and Newton County is pretty much my home. And as you can see that this is an area that's very rural part of the state. And it's all carved out in a karst topography. We're pretty much a limestone-based environment full of springs that come out of the ground at about 56 degrees and form some of the best streams that you're going to find anywhere throughout this Ozarks region. And that's where my beginnings are, these huge springs and spring-fed creeks that we have. And then again, this is the habitat for smallmouth bass. Hopefully you've gotten out and been able to experience some of these streams. There are plenty of them in the state. Back when I was part of the Arkansas Smallmouth Bass Task Force, maybe some of you served with me on that with the Game and Fish Commission back in the 90s. Our job was to pretty much study the smallmouth bass and survey anglers and kind of make assessments on stream quality and stream populations based on what we knew and our knowledge and observation on these streams. And I fished some, 88 streams throughout the Ozarks and Ouachita region, and there's more than that. I didn't get to all of them. But this is a wonderful environment. Places that I call my home waters. I do fly fish for trout. Love the game of fly fishing for trout, but day in and day out, smallmouth. That's my fish. That's the native fish. That is the fish that is resident in these waters. They are indigenous here, it's where I want to be, and it's what I spend my time doing. I want to talk to you a little bit about the something I've been involved in. We've done this smallmouth tour across the state, and what we've done is the purpose of this is to educate people to the resource. And a lot of people, they may know, they can identify a smallmouth bass. They fish for smallmouth bass, but they don't understand a lot about the very critical nature of smallmouth and the waters and where they live, the things that make smallmouth unique, and also the education that is needed and the messages we've taught to ensure that we're always going to have smallmouth in these waters. I'm going to show you a little bit of, as we kind of go through here, just a little bit of what smallmouth habitat throughout Arkansas looks like, whether it's some of the streams that you're familiar with or some of the smaller blue lines across the state. Pretty much smallmouth inhabit, for the most part, the northern half of the state, the northern Ouachita, the mountainous regions above the fall line, the Ouachitas and the Ozarks region. But the smallmouth, I feel there is we have opened up a lot of access. I grew up very, I guess you might say, spoiled in some respects as to what the smallmouth waters were. I was a bike ride from Crooked Creek, would spend my whole day down there through the summer. My parents, it was a different era, different time. I lived, where I could fish pretty much on Crooked Creek all day long and never worry. My parents knew where I was going to be, and I learned a lot about these fish. And the things have changed somewhat. Okay, back in that day, you could not get on Crooked Creek for the most part unless you knew landowners or knew the back roads. There was no internet. There was no Googling, Google Earth and that type of thing, and barely maps. And so for the most part, I enjoyed seldom ever seeing another angler on my stretches of water, my home waters that I fished. And things have changed considerably. And we live in a day and age where pretty much, we have opened up a lot of accesses, and there's good and bad in that. It provides a lot of opportunities for people to access these streams. Selfishly, from my standpoint, I would like to see another angler on any Ozark streams. I think we've got plenty, but that's not going to happen. And you, as a enthusiastic fly fisher, want to know where these places are, and you want to fish these streams. So my message is, and hopefully the Game and Fish Commission's response and message will be, as they've opened up these accesses, is that the regulations must follow. This particular fish here, in my opinion, is the symbol. It is the living symbol, and needs to be elevated to that point of what the wild Ozark and Ouachita Mountain streams are all about. We don't stock these fish. I say that we don't. The hatchery truck doesn't back up every week and dump 5,000 out in this pool and that. And we don't need to do that. I would never want to see that happen. Smallmouth are difficult to raise in hatchery environments, from what I've heard anyway. They're such a wild fish, and they should be kept that way. As long as the habitat's good and the water quality is there, the population should maintain good, healthy numbers. What we're seeing, though, with increased access and with increased angling pressure is declining numbers. There's very few streams that I can actually say fish better today than they did 25, 30 years ago. And I think most people that are actively pursuing these fish would say the same thing. So what's going to change? How can I ensure that my kids, my grandkids, are going to have the opportunity to enjoy what is so passionate to me and the beauty of these streams? I would love to see some changes made. The regulations we have, they were good regulations that I helped propose back in the 90s, but I think in this day and age, we need to be even more stringent. I think smallmouth bass need to be totally eliminated out of the harvest wording. They are a fish, again, that in moving waters and wild streams are the symbol of these places. And we can fish for. I'm not against harvesting fish. Man, I love a good fish fry. There are fish that have a life cycle that's much faster, but when smallmouth grow at such extreme slow growth rates, and you can easily harvest out pools, and it happens, I think we need to kind of reevaluate the catch and release ethic and put it in as law, basically, in a lot of these streams. The smallmouth bass, we've actually got 3 different subspecies throughout our range. We have the northern species, which is pretty much in the Buffalo River and up in through the northern part of the state and all. And you see those in Missouri quite a bit. We also have what's a very unique species, only found in a few counties and regions, and that is the Neosho strain. The Neosho strain is very beautiful. You find them in Barren Fork Creek and Flint Creek and places like that, and up in the upper Illinois River drainage and northwest Arkansas. Beautiful fish, a little more slender in body appearance, almost always a blazed red-orange eye and a very buttery lemon color that they have. And then down in the Ouachitas, you will have the Ouachita subspecies of smallmouth. A lot of people don't realize it's a separate, but if you laid all 3 of those fish out, you would easily see the identification differences in not only the coloration, the spot patterns that in the Ouachita one, especially in the fin, there's some unique coloration and spot patterns and things like that in it. But a lot of it has to do with the geographic regions of where these fish locate and are found. But one of the things, the characteristic, just real quickly on a Neosho smallmouth bass, this slide I'm showing here is very characteristic of a Neosho. They have this bottom lip that extends out further than the top lip, and you only find that on the Neosho strain of smallmouth. It's kind of like the fish that's got a little bit of a knot on the bottom of his jaw there and such. The streams that I fish, I'm showing you a slide, and one thing, I've been criticized, I guess, somewhat of maybe talking too much about smallmouth as far as publicizing him, and maybe that's true. I don't know that I apologize necessarily for that. I'm not trying to create pressure on waters and all, but at the same time, these waters are known. Anybody can find them. and there's lots of public access, and they're there for us to enjoy as part of our state's treasure. What my message is that we need to, if we're going to fish these intelligently, and not fish them as a consumer or a harvester of the fish in these species, but respect them and enjoy them and use methods that ensure a healthy released fish into these streams. But there's a lot of streams that, I love to take my family, even on a 4th of July weekend, Memorial Day weekend, and I've got my secret spots that we can go to and we can fish all day long, and we're not going to see anyone else. And it should always be that way. But that's, so I'm going to be very tight-lipped. I'm going to be very secretive about a lot of the places I go, because I don't want to see hordes of people in some of these, what I call my sacred grounds, and I'm sure you're that way with your fishing spots too. But there are places, namely like the Buffalo River, that is open to the public, and it's very, very heavily used. It's probably one of the heaviest used rivers of any, but it's still a good smallmouth stream, and it will continue to be a good smallmouth water as long as we protect it and fish it with intelligence. One of the neat things about smallmouth bass, I'm showing you here in a couple of slides, is smallmouth have the ability to chameleon. Very few freshwater fish can do this. I don't know of any freshwater fish that can do this with the same speed and ability to camouflage to their surroundings as a smallmouth bass. You're seeing here this marbleized barred structure. It's so characteristic of smallmouth bass, and it gives them the perfect camouflage on a marbled gravel stream bed in clear water, which most of the time they live. But you can take that very same fish and put him under a boulder like this table here and hold him in the dark area, and he'll go, coal black, just almost total black from tip to tail. And you can take that same fish then and move him out in the sunlight, and that in seconds he'll adapt to a kind of a blonde caramel brown color and such. So that's just an amazing ability for them to not only hide and all, but to ambush prey and just to match their surroundings. Again, an amazing fish. You can see some of these different photos of a lot of the little spring creeks that I fish are just gin clear. Some of the highest water quality that you're going to find anywhere throughout the Ozarks and Ouachita region. And I do a lot of sight fishing. That's a lot of the fun. To me, the hunting fishing combination that you find with clear water smallmouth bass is one of the things that makes these species so amazing. It seems like in this day and age, everybody owns a kayak. I can remember back, this slide here is, I bet it's 30 years old, and that old kayak, which I still have, and kayak designs have definitely come a long way, but a kayak is a nice way to just get down very small waters and get away from where the crowds go and such, and it'll fit in the back of the pickup, and you can hit some back roads and fish a lot of these areas and such. We also use canoes a lot. I'm more of a canoe guy, really, on the bigger size waters. I think two people tandem in a canoe, or one guy is handling the canoe and guiding for you, so he always keeps you in good casting angle and casting position. When my wife and I go, probably 90% of the time she's in the front of the boat and I'm guiding her anyway. But you're just, a person in the back of the boat, is your position is to always keep that canoe angle and she likes me to keep the painted side down on the water and not flip the canoe anyway. We're pretty good on that. But anyway, fly fishing out of the canoe as you move along and hit these different spots, I think a perfect, a lot of people use rafts, and some people even use john boats on the bigger waters. But the one thing I would tell you is that wild smallmouth are a wild fish, and they're very spooky. I think a lot of people really kind of shoot themselves in the foot before they even get a chance to catch a big smallmouth by spooking their fish. I like to wade, especially this time of year, late summer, when the creeks get very low. It's an amazing way to approach these fish. Here's our dear friend Dave and Emily Whitlock on a stream that we float every year, and the canoe is just a great stealthy way to go and to approach these fish. Here we're accessing a area of the stream and get out quite a bit to wade through some areas. Fishing the grass beds on some of the streams over in Oklahoma. Very, very effective from a canoe. Some of our streams, especially you get over in the northeastern part of the state, have very steep banks on both sides, and it's impossible to wade them. 11 Point's one of the rivers that in particular, that I'm speaking of, and a canoe is really about the only way that you can effectively fish those types of streams. Some of the best scenery you're going to see in the state of Arkansas is on these waterways. You know, part of the enjoyment of smallmouth fishing is seeing this beautiful environment of the Ozarks and Ouachita. Some of the wildest places that you will experience and get to are these smallmouth streams. There's a variety of species also in our clear Ozark streams, our spring-fed streams. Long-ear sunfish, definitely one of them. There's not a tropical fish I don't believe swimming is probably as pretty as just our local Spring Creek long ears. And the beautiful blend of turquoise and beautiful peachy orange colors and fluorescent colors on them is just makes an amazing, remarkable fish. And you know, if the smallmouth ever aren't cooperating, you can always catch long ears. So you just put on a small fly, and if you've got a little 1 or 2 weight rod, I mean they're incredible fighters and very willing. Beautiful fish. We also have 3 species of panfish that are the Ozark bass, the rock bass, and the shadow bass. And a lot of people, you know, the 3 are very similar, but if you laid all 3 of them out again side by side, you would easily see the differences in the 3 subspecies. The true rock bass is only found up in the northern part of the state. They were stocked, they said, into Table Rock Lake, and they got into the Kings River drainage and kind of spread out somewhat from there. The Ozark bass, which this one here is pretty much the most common one you find, but some of the streams through the southern part of the range and over the eastern part of the range have a shadow bass. And again, all of them are very close. There's some differences in spot patterns and things like that kind of make up the differences. This is the large Ozark bass here. One of the neat things about Ozark bass, a lot of people don't understand, Missouri has really caught on to this, and a lot of their streams, they put a 9-inch limit on their Ozark bass. And you're asking, well, why would they do that? Well, they have found that Ozark bass are pretty much 1 year per inch in length. In other words, a 9-inch fish is 9 years old. And Ozark bass are also a cluster spawner, meaning they colony spawn. And I've seen this tragically happen way too many times on the streams that I fish. Is, you know, somebody may be all pro catch and release on smallmouth bass, like I'm not going to keep any of those, but boy, I would like a mess of fish today. So they'll come into a big cluster spawn area of Ozark bass and fill the cooler with them, and the damage they've done. I've seen a lot of populations depleted. I was talking to Dave Whitlock. I fished over on his stream here just a week ago and caught a true rock bass in there, and he was telling me, like, you know, how he used to go out and they'd catch 50 or 60 a day, and then it was hard pressed to have a 20 fish day. And he says, I seldom 1 or 2 maybe a week of fishing, and it's all from over harvest. So you have to be, you know, these smallmouth streams, these Ozark spring creeks are very fragile environments. The green sunfish, if you're wanting to eat a fish, that's the fish to eat. Okay, they have a very fast life cycle. They'll mature in size in about a 5-year period. They're plentiful as ever. They probably exist in every puddle and body of water throughout the state of Arkansas or throughout all their range. And they're very, very, very prolific fish. See a lot of variety of different types of panfish in these streams. And, you know, I just recently kind of reluctantly signed up and fished, kind of out of some prodding from some friends of mine, to fish this new Odyssey one fly tournament they had, and won that on landing 15 species in a 15-hour. Would not recommend. That's a pretty grueling tournament anyway, and so I kind of had to put my game face on and protect my home water reputation anyway. Wasn't going to let anybody from Louisiana or Indiana or out of state beat me on my home waters. So, but you know, we have a lot of variety of species. The other day I caught 12 different species on a day's fishing. So it's common to catch a variety of fish in our very prolific local streams and creeks. These are Kentucky spotted bass. When you get down into the Arkansas River drainage, a lot of the streams that flow into the Arkansas River probably have a higher population of spotted bass than they do of smallmouth. They're a similar fish. They don't quite have the same spunk and all, but I never frown when I catch one. They're great topwater eaters. They very aggressive fish and big largemouth. I have personally landed largemouth bass, in the 7 and 8 pound range on several Ozark streams. So, most of the time, these are not the Florida strain largemouth. These are true northern strain, and they're sort of long fish, and they're great jumpers and amazing fighters, and usually very picky, somewhat difficult to catch. A lot of people turn their nose up at carp, and it's usually people who never caught one. The smartest fish swimming, I really believe that. They have the highest olfactory senses of any fish. That's pretty well been proven. The studies and such, they're quite a challenge. And, we routinely catch them in the 20, even up to 25, 30 pound range. 7, 8 weight fly rod, that's quite a battle. But catching monster carp on the fly, and that can be mixed in with your smallmouth fishing on a lot of streams. They hit my creek crawler fly probably as well as anything, but there's a variety of different little nymphs and different types of flies. Cottonwood seed flies tend to work real well at times. They have a beautiful scale pattern on them. They're very highly underrated fish. This is a grass carp, and another unique fish that you're going to find that quite challenging to catch on the fly rod. The gar species, long-nosed gar, short-nosed gar. One thing I've noticed in Crooked Creek, I never saw gar in Crooked Creek at all when I was a kid. And now in about the first, I'd say 10 miles coming up out of the White River, it's about every pool's got a population of gar in there. After some of the big floods, they've moved in and populated. And I don't know if they're necessarily a bad thing. The gar eat primarily 2.5, 3 inch little schooling minnows. They're kind of built to do that. Not that they wouldn't. They've got to catch a big fish first, and they're really not built, like a pike necessarily. They're more of a minnow eater, but they're a lot of fun. You can catch them on the fly. This is what keeps most people out of the smallmouth streams, a fear of snakes. And we do have a healthy population of the cottonmouth. He's the one that I was on the Kings River a few weeks ago, and I was just amazed at the amount of big, thick, devilish cottonmouths that I ran into. And don't let them keep you out of the stream, but keep a healthy respect for them. Basically, what I tell clients when I'm guiding them is, don't step and don't reach where you can't see. Just don't go reaching back into a root ball when you hang up on it, and don't go wading through, tall, wet grass up to your knees where you can't see. And most of the time they'll either get out of their way, but not always. You got to have some snake smarts about you if you're going to fish in smallmouth streams. I've done a lot of fly design over the years. There are some fly patterns that I've developed anyway, namely the Hada Creek Crawler, which is a very standard, very useful, effective crawdad imitation for smallmouth. But like any smart angler that's fishing for bass, you want to fish the entire water column from the surface to the bottom. And I think the main thing that a lot of fly fishers miss is the bottom bouncing, heavy crawling style of jig-like patterns. And if you're going to catch big smallmouth, they eat a lot of those type of things that live in the stream bed and in the stream bottom. Matching the minnow is very important in very clear water situations. Tying your minnow out of materials that look like the minnow. Here's probably one of the most effective, the craft fur minnow that I make with lead eyes, and again, it's tied in a color that matches the central stone rollers, the dusky striped shiners, and different dace minnows that we have in smallmouth range. Usually, about a 2.5 inch one is very much the go-to pattern, but smallmouth routinely eat what we locals call river slicks. It's like a stone roller that's 6-7 inches in length. So I tie big minnow patterns to catch big smallmouth. Big bait, big fish, a lot of time is true. Here's some of the smallmouth taking on some of these minnow patterns anyway. Crawdads are very synonymous with smallmouth for sure. You catch a big fish like this, and when you're holding it, you feel its belly, and it's kind of crunchy. Those are big. And when they get on the crawdad feed, I've seen them just devour numbers of them. A lot of times you'll see, Atlanta fish, you'll see pinchers sticking out of its out of his throat anyway, and that's definitely a cue that they're keying in on the smallmouth, that are keying in on the crawdads. People always, I've been here lately as the Hada Creek crawlers kind of gained in popularity, I guess, or notoriety or use anyway. I've done a couple of interviews about the origins of this fly and this different type of thing. Actually, it goes back all the way to when I lived in Mena, Arkansas, and I taught art at Mena High School. I set up a fly tying desk with the blessing of my school principal, as long as I gave him a few flies every now and then and told him where I was fishing anyway. This is actually the first prototype that I ever made. This was back in 1986, probably, in Mena, Arkansas. So that fly has kind of developed and changed a little bit in design, a little bit over the years, but it's still probably one of the most effective, if not the most effective, crawdad pattern, because it's weighted heavily with the hook down and reverse weight, so that it acts and there's a lot of commercial crawdads out there that are just not fish catchers because they don't behave like a crawdad. They can't fish them on the stream bed and without fouling up like a crawdad fly. My good friend Ben Levin has guided with me for years, and he fishes these a lot and has helped me a lot with the perfection of this particular pattern. Fish them in around the rocks, fishing where the crawdads are. This is down in the Buffalo River with Ben, fishing a very deep pool of water, probably a 15-foot deep pool, and fishing right tight to the bottom, crawling his crawdad, and this big lunker smallmouth had to have it. These are mad toms. Mad toms are these little slender minnow-type catfish. I don't know what it is about them, but smallmouth love to eat them. This is a checkered mad tom. There's must be some kind of a scent that they give off, or a coloration pattern that I've seen big smallmouth just go nuts over mad toms anyway. And just big rabbit strip flies are probably one of the best effective patterns to imitate those. Hellgrammites, which are the larvae of the Dobson fly, are very, very effective for, just a flattened out woolly booger type fly, and a gray, black, brown pattern is very effective to imitate those. Dead drift them kind of as you would nymph fishing for trout, and very effective fly. This is what Dobson flies become when they're adults. Those scissor type pinchers that are made for cutting the heads off of mayflies and other types of insects. They're pretty wicked looking. That's like something out of a Alfred Hitchcock movie or something. Those things got 4 foot long, we wouldn't be around. Here's a fly that Ben Levin and myself have been instrumental in developing. It's just a big streamer fly to imitate these bigger types of bait fish. And over the years, we watch spin fisher a lot. A lot of spin fishermen tend to be very effective on the smallmouth, and we're like, okay, what are they doing that we're not doing? Well, some of it has to do with the size of the baits that they're throwing compared to your average fly fisher, but also the way it's weighted, the way it swims, that type of thing. And the development of the sluggo minnows and the bass assassin soft plastic minnows and things has been really very effective in catching smallmouth, especially in late spring, post-spawn periods, things like that. So we've developed a fly that's a wool head, or a different type of acrylic hair head with a long tail, and we weight these in such a manner so that they are off balance, and we tie them with a loop knot. We retrieve them with a very jerky suspended minnow type retrieve, and they have proven to be very, very effective when the bass are in that type of a pattern. Another pattern is just your simple deer hair muddler floating with a marabou tail, kind of making that waking minnow kind of skipping across the surface. Popping bugs in the late summer or throughout the summer are very, very effective. Yellow and white, blue tend to be a good color when they're hitting the dragonflies quite a bit. But the topwater bite is, it's an amazing thing. Something that when smallmouth crash on the surface, that's a fun way to do it. We fish at night quite a bit, and we're using these very large topwater patterns. As a kid, I'd go with the old men on the Buffalo River and Crooked Creek, and we had jitterbug fish with big, large black jitterbugs. That was about the only lure that they used, and to create a lot of noise and a lot of commotion on the surface, and you'd listen for the strike, and you'd feel the strike. And so wade fishing in a pool with cottonmouths around. That sounds like fun, doesn't it, to a lot of people anyway? But my wife's gone with me a few times. She enjoys it. But some of these big fish that you cannot catch in the daytime because they've been fished over so hard and they're so smart, they become total, um, a different fish at night, and they can be caught. Here's just a picture of a few of the nighttime catches. This time of year, late August into September, sometimes some years more than others, we get these big hatches of huge grasshoppers, and along the hay fields, along these streams, those just like on a western trout stream, get blown into the stream, and smallmouth cruise the bank, so you can see a smallmouth waiting on hoppers. And this is kind of a neat. The fly there is actually Dave Whitlock's original bass hopper, and he gave that to me on a trip after he had totally worn it out on about 50 good smallmouth that day. And but it was designed to imitate the big grasshoppers, and it's a very effective pattern, and one that catches a lot of fish. But that one's pretty ratty because it'd been through a long day. Smallmouth are very competitive, very voracious, if that's the right word. Many times, like here with my son-in-law Tad, who's a great little fly fisher in his own right, many times, somebody would cast and hook a smallmouth, and while bringing it in, that bass would be shadowed by 1, 2, or maybe as many as 8 different smallmouth. And if you can cast right in there in the mix, many times you can get a second hookup on that. So, and same situation happened here on the Buffalo River. Chad caught this largemouth bass, and Ben threw right in behind it and caught the smallmouth that was kind of chasing after whatever the smallmouth or the largemouth had eaten. This is a situation, this is actually a true photo, not staged in any way, but the long-eared sunfish was caught on the topwater bug. While bringing it in, the smallmouth grabbed the long-ear and managed to get himself hooked too. So kind of a nice consolation prize there. Again, some of the amazing streams. The Buffalo River is just an incredible resource. It is very heavily used. I kind of somewhat dismayed about that, having again grown up enjoying the Buffalo River with very low population and very little use by the general public for the most part, and through the 70s and all when I was a kid, and just seeing it become what it is today, which is probably one of the most popular recreationally used streams in America. But the smallmouth population is still pretty good in some places. It needs some enhancement and protection, and it'll be fine, I think. But these streams, there's a lot of streams throughout Oklahoma that we fish that are amazing streams also. The smallmouth range extends almost all the way over to Tulsa, and then it definitely goes all the way up in, if you kind of take a triangle through Missouri all the way up to St. Louis, and then come back down to just north of Jonesboro a little bit, and on probably the Saline would be the most closest to Little Rock here, and then go all the way down to the Little River, I think is our most southern smallmouth stream just north of Texarkana. But there are amazing waterways if you're willing to get out there and look for them. One of the things about smallmouth streams, we're kind of a lot of trout fishers, especially fishing stocked rivers. They're used to a parking lot they can pull up in and get their waders on and sit and talk to their buddies and all that kind of thing, and then just wade out and fish right there in a hole. Well, I think the other day I had a couple out, and we logged 9.7 miles in a day on our little pedometer. And that sounds like we didn't realize we'd gone that far. My wife did 6.5, 7 miles on the Buffalo the other day wade fishing. And so you've got to be willing to walk. I always tell people the best fishing starts where the last footprint ends. And there's a lot of truth to that. Smallmouth is something that's not done best, fly fishing anyway, in groups. It's usually a solo experience or maybe with another buddy. And being willing to and go and get into wild places is what that's all about. I can't think of any smallmouth waters here in this state where you're pulling right up to a paved parking lot access, maybe 1 or 2, but very few where there's good quality smallmouth fishing close to that. As far as the season for smallmouth, you can tell by this photo, that this is one of the first warm days of spring. There's just a little hint of some redbud color, redbud color going on in the trees. But that's when you're going to catch these big females pre-spawn, and they're pretty hungry after a long winter. Again, these streams, as far as I'm showing this, that sometimes it just gets too hot. You just got to get in there and cool off a little bit. But the season for smallmouth pretty much is early spring through about mid to late fall. Basically, when the water temperature hits about a 55-degree mark and stays above that for an extended period of time. There are some situations where you can catch smallmouth in the winter months. I've done that, but it's not what I'd call a high percentage game. Generally, when you catch one, they're pretty good sized ones that have kind of migrated down into some of the deepest holes and are kind of hunkered in for the winter. But the late, I've had some exceptional days in October, early November on some of our rivers. There's some places on the Buffalo that I like to fish in the late season. There is one stream that I will smallmouth fish through the winter, and that is the Spring River, because as the name implies, Spring River, that water temperature stays pretty constant in those spring holes, and I've caught really nice smallmouth in the middle of snowstorms in January in the Spring River. So again, it's all about water temperature. This is a nice smallmouth caught in February on one of our streams as the water starts to slightly warm up a little bit. I want to just show you some of the smallmouth here. The Buffalo River, there are very few guys still living who fished the White River prior to its damming. But if you meet one of those gentlemen and the way they light up and talk about the White River, I would love to have fished those days, pre-1950s anyway, on the White River. I guess it was just amazing. I'd probably equate it to a much bigger version of the Buffalo River with the bluff banks and all. There's still good smallmouth fishing in the White River in a lot of places. A lot of people don't realize that, but you can catch really nice smallmouth in good numbers in certain places still on the White River. But the Buffalo River, doing extended float trips, overnight float trips, I love to take people, and some of my biggest smallmouth every year are caught on the Buffalo River. We've had some great threats to our fisheries. I just want to show this a little bit. Back in the day, Dave and Emily Whitlock, myself, and several others were part of the Crooked Creek Coalition to basically see if we couldn't, get enough interest, basically, is what it was, in people that felt that gravel mining was very, very destructive, and it was. It was ruining many of our streams and still is on some, but we fought a very heated battle in the public courts to bring an end to gravel mining. And so thank goodness that in-stream gravel mining, at least on Crooked Creek and the extraordinary resource waters, the Blue Ribbon streams, has ceased for the most part and is on a permit-only basis and in some areas. And I think that's pretty much saved a lot of these streams. Are slow to recover, slow to heal from a lot of that damage, but scenes like this of big in-stream gravel mining operations, hopefully it will be something of the past. In-stream gravel mining has done tremendous damage in widening the stream, shallowing the stream, warming up the stream, causes massive erosion of the banks and caving in, and fills in. This is a hole of water. As a kid, I used to swim in that hole of water. It always maintained about a 10-foot depth, and now it's gravel from one end to the other where it's filled in, and the stream is actually braided around and causes this island in there of all that overburden of gravel that's eroded in there. And it didn't do it over a few years. It did it like after one flood, from stable banks that have caved in from the erosion all from the gravel mining. Fish don't spawn well when there's heavy silt. They need good clean gravel in order to spawn. Also, algae blooms that are toxic to fish and can kill fish and increase your water temperature. A lot of that was happening when they gravel mine. They basically altered you could look at Crooked Creek of a map and see places where it just became wide and shallow, and this is what happens anyway. And smallmouth just don't live in those type of environments. There's a lot of non or direct source pollution still that, a lot of city street runoffs and everything, city municipalities and everything will dump directly into these streams, and it creates some dead zones a lot of times right in around those areas and below. This slide here kind of thrills me. These are my babies anyway. All these little black specks in that slide are young fry smallmouth straight out of a spawning bed. But even then, it is a tough environment. A lot of these fish will never make it to adulthood. When you have a growth rate, okay, get this, folks. A lot of people don't realize this. This isn't a farm pond or a lake or anything like that. Ozark, especially Neosho strain and our native smallmouth bass, on average it takes 6 years to grow a 12-inch fish in these streams. That is the statewide average. Some are even slower than that. But the statewide average is 6 inches to grow a 12-inch fish. Now, these fish will live long lives. We've documented fish that are over 15, 16 years of age, but still, under 18, 19 inches in length. It's kind of like us humans, a man may grow to his 6-foot height or whatever his maximum height is by the time he's 18, 19, 20 years old, and he may live a long time. Our smallmouth, you seldom see one in these streams over 18, 19 inches in length. If you see a 20-incher or 21-incher, that's one in thousands of these smallmouth anyway. But they've got to go through this cycle first. They have to have a successful spawn. They have to make it through the first year. There's all kinds of predators against them, other fish, herons, ospreys, mink, otters, two-legged folks that want to carry stringers. So it's a tough life there in the stream for a smallmouth bass. But again, this is my fish. This is what I identify with. I love taking people and showing them the streams. It's always kind of jokingly, I'll blindfold you to a lot of the places I take, but this day with GPS, everybody finds where I go, and there's not many secrets anymore, and that's both good and bad anyway. But, this is my passion. This is what, if you give me one day left and said, okay, you can go fish, and what are you going to choose? It'll be an Ozark Mountain stream, and, chasing smallmouth bass that seldom get over 3 pounds in size, on a light 5 or 6 weight fly rod, wading in these cool mountain streams. To me, that's as good as it gets. It's an amazing fishery. My wife and I, we like to float and, to camp out and spend the night on the Buffalo River or one of these other streams, and under a great starlit night is one of the great experiences of the Ozarks that everybody should have. So, go out there and do it. It's not for the faint of heart. You can't be scared of the dark, and you can't be scared of Sasquatch. He fishes out there. I've seen him, talked with him, tied flies from some material he gave me and everything. But there's let me just show you real quickly some of the hero shots, if you will, of what can grow in our local streams. That's not a smallmouth, but that's a big carp. That thing will tow you around for about 3 days. But the only way you're going to grow big smallmouth like that is they have to go through the growth cycle to reach this age. And that's why it's so important to release those big broodfish back into your water system. All of these fish are probably a minimum of 12 years of age. Okay, think about that for a minute. You take that fish, make fish sticks out of him. It's going to take that long to replace that fish into the system. And there is not a fish out there that will give you pound for pound as incredible a fight as what you're going to find on these big smallmouth in these streams. A 4-pounder is just legendary. There's one of my best ones off the Buffalo River. Just barely missed the 20-inch mark. But, beautiful fish. Old fish. Just has that old fish look to it, too. A fight that I'll never forget. Just a memorable fight. Anyway, I encourage you to, if you really want one of the greatest experiences the Ozarks have, the true Ozark experience is the wild smallmouth bass. And so get out there and do it. Be very wise about your fishing methods. I know all of you guys are into catch and release, and I don't have to worry about you all, but don't be afraid to share that message and to talk to people and become active in conservation issues and helping to educate others. And that's what it takes, is when people self-educate to the reason why smallmouth bass need to be in our streams in great numbers, and and not harvested, then we're in good shape and our future looks good for them. But anyway, thanks for having me. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I don't see you on my stream, but if you go, we run into each other. You got a friend. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Duane, for that presentation. I'll tell you, I could listen to people talk about smallmouth all day. This has really been the second session that we've had in a row. We had Evan Smedley on the Washitas last month, and we had Duane talking about the Ozarks this month. If that doesn't light your fire to go out and check out the smallmouth scene in Arkansas, I don't think anything will. And I hope everybody takes away the fragility of this environment and how important it is to protect this environment. It is a great game fish. The other thing is, I was taking notes throughout this, and when those hero shots came up, I saw quite a few AFF members who've not invited me to go smallmouth fishing. I'll be contacting you in the next week or so. Again, it was great to have Duane here. I hope you'll go see him at Rivertown Gallery, where he has a lot of his art, but I guarantee you can find somebody that will talk about smallmouth there. And I'll tell you, this is the second time I've spent a lot of time recently with Duane, because I did do the smallmouth tour. If you get an opportunity to do that, it will fast forward you in your smallmouth journey, no matter how far along you think you are already. I'm going to turn this over now to Dewey Freeman, one of AFF's most accomplished fly tyers, who's going to tie Steve Parrott's Kulo Rojo Peacock Soft Tackle, which is translated to roughly the Colorado Red Ass.
Okay, I'm going to demonstrate a fly for you from a tyer out in Colorado named Steve Parrott. Steve has got a collection of Euro-style nymphs, and he's got a really nice CD or DVD that you probably, if you get your hands on one, but it's about tying Euro nymphs. And he's got a number of really neat flies out there. I'm going to tie one of them that he calls the Kulo Rojo pheasant tail jig. And it is on a jig hook. It's on a Umpqua 403 BLJ, so it's a barbless jig hook, and utilizes silver bead. I've got silver slotted bead with a little faceted on there. You don't have to have that, but I like the bling. A rib from a chartreuse crinkle flash, and then the body is the life cycle nymph dubbing in a color called peacock, and the tail is red sparkle yarn. I'm going to use black thread. This is 10-aught Vivus. I like Vivus thread, and I like the way it ties, and it's pretty strong for its diameter. So let's get the bead on the hook. There's no real easy way to do this, but I get it started upside down like this. Turn it over, and now I want that bead to sit down on the hook eye. Start my thread right behind it and just build up a little bit when the bead stops moving. Now the bead stopped moving and it's pinched up against there. And then I just want to take the thread back. Take a little of this sparkle yarn, just one strand. Tie it in back here at the tail, just above the bend. Trim off the waist, and I want to trim that fairly short, so I'll do it just slightly longer than the bend of the hook. For all you guys who like to fish the red ass in Arkansas, this is the Colorado version of that in the Euro nymphing style. And I want to tie in my my rib now. I'll get one single strand of this crystal flash. It's so small you can't see it to cut it. I'll move my thread up and wrap this back. Now I'm going to dub this with this Peacock Life Cycle nymph dubbing. Take out a fairly generous bit and start it on the hook. Notice I've left a good bit right here, but that I'm going to end up using that. It just helps me from going back in the bag again. And I want to taper my body, and I will give it a little extra twist just to keep that tight. I want to go about 75% of the way up the shank, maybe just a little bit more. I want to take my rib evenly spaced up the abdomen. Trim out the waist, and now it calls for a wing. We're going to put a little a little partridge wing. I'm going to use a nice partridge again. Find a good feather with a nice look about the right size. I'm going to prep this feather by pulling off all the soft stuff off the bottom. Now, some people don't like this, but I like to take those, to keep it from being too populated, take a little bit of the fibers off the far side. You have to be really careful with this because these stems can split in half on you, so you have to be really careful taking those off. See what I'm doing? I'm just stripping off
Open a little lower in front of the hook when you finish.
some of the fibers from that side. Okay, then I'm going to tie this on right behind my abdomen. Cut that stem off. And then I need to catch the tip of that feather with my hackle pliers. And one wrap. Try to stroke those feathers back. 2. Catch the tip. Now I want to get some more of my dubbing. I want that feather to push back a little bit, but I'm going to dub in front of it to help push it back. So I'm going to take some more of my peacock nymph dubbing, make a small noodle, and then pull those feathers back just a little bit and dub up against them a little collar. And then I want a whip finish behind the bead. Trim off my thread end, and there is Parrots, Culo Rojo, pheasant tail. Yeah.